So one of the most common, not surprisingly, is falls. I do sometimes do some other kind of presentations on risk management, and so there are a lot of claim studies in those. And that is one of the most frequent for assisted living. There was one fell, and they actually went to the hospital, and they never returned to the facility, but they passed about 6 months later. They filed a claim, and as much as it initially didn't look like they were going to pay, I think probably about 100,000 on that one.
Welcome to the Row Room Assisted Living Podcast with your hosts, Charlie Cameron and Alex Schloe. This is your go-to show for cutting-edge insights from industry leaders in residential assisted living.
Whether you're ready to launch your own assisted living business or looking to invest in this fast-growing, high-impact sector, we are here to equip you with the tools, strategies, and confidence you need to succeed. Get ready to ride the silver tsunami and change the future of senior care. Now on to today's show. Assisted Living Podcast, where we help aspiring and current assisted living owners, investors, and operators build successful businesses, provide exceptional care, and avoid costly mistakes. I'm your host today, Dr. Alex Schloe, and today we are discussing a part of assisted living ownership that is often overlooked until something goes wrong: insurance and risk management. We're also going to talk about how owners are beginning to utilize artificial intelligence to review insurance quotes and policies, and talk about where that can be helpful as well as where that can be potentially dangerous. Today, I'm joined by Lori Conway, owner of Lori Conway Insurance, an independent insurance agency focused on the unique needs of assisted living homes and senior care businesses. Lori works with facilities primarily in Texas, but is expanding to additional states. She is a wealth of knowledge and has built extensive relationships with insurance companies that understand assisted living, which can be a challenging and specialized industry to insure. Lori, welcome to the Row Room Assisted Living Podcast. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you for being here.
Thank you. It's great to be here. I've been so fortunate to get to work with a number of assisted living facilities, but I do also kind of see that sometimes the owners don't quite realize just what some of the risks that they face might be. And also sometimes, unfortunately, as good as their intentions are, that homeowner's agent that you've worked with for years might not be the best fit. I've been in insurance for, over 25 years now, but still it is a different kind of coverage. So you do have to do your homework. And having worked on the retail agent side for a long time, and then having worked on the broker side too, I think that has given me maybe some insight that other agents might not have on not only what people need for their facilities, but how to actually secure the coverage. Because some of those relationships that I went back to when I trying to get everything, the businesses going and making those connections. So I went back to some of the people that were my coworkers when I was on the broker side. So I think that really helped secure a lot of the placements that we needed. And also kind of learned how to make sure that your submission actually gets looked at and not just thrown on the floor or your email deleted. That has been helpful.
Yeah, relationships are everything in this business. And Lori, before we get into more of the specifics of insurance, do you mind telling us a little bit more about your background, which you hit on some of that just now, but also how did you become focused on assisted living and senior care?
Like a lot of people, I had a personal connection. Unfortunately, saw that maybe some of the big box, the chain places with 100 beds were maybe not. Those are good facilities, but sometimes those are not the best. And that's really started focusing on some of the ones that are the little, not necessarily real small, but that are more geared away from those big box setups. So there was a kind of a personal thing for me, but then also in working with some of the owners, I realized just how hard of a time they had getting coverage. And so often you just get sent this 7-page application and here, fill this out and I'll do what I can. But I realized pretty quickly that the owners are so busy. They're wearing so many hats. So initially taking, and it doesn't take that much extra time to sit with an owner and fill it out together and navigate that part of it. Just kind of seeing how difficult it was for some of the owners just to even get a quote, much less get coverage in place. I think that really kind of made me, and plus just seeing how hard people work to get their facilities going and to take care of the loved ones, and knowing how important the facilities are. So wanted to kind of help out with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, not only are assisted living facilities and senior living in general more complex, I'm sure, to insure than a typical property, but also when you get more to the residential or the smaller setting, there's also some complexity that comes with that as well. What do you
Right.
feel like makes an assisted living home more complicated to insure than, say, a traditional rental property or a small business?
Part of it is there's limited markets. So knowing where to find the coverage can sometimes be a chore for an agent that's not familiar with it. And just some of the complexities and knowing, finding the right programs, because a lot of times if you try to shoehorn, or if you will, or piece together a program, finding the companies that are geared towards the assisted livings can really help. Because if you just try to do a professional here and a general liability here, you're going to have gaps. And just the complexities of a lot of people thinking, I drive by it, it looks like a house. I should be able to insure it like a home, but it's not. It's a business. And then just a lot of the complexities of making sure everybody, all your employees are trained properly and all of those ins and outs. But, and just, there's a lot of different layers and
Yeah,
knowing, yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. So there's just,
Yeah.
there's a lot of different layers to know how to piece those together.
Yeah, absolutely. Are there any particular risks that new assisted living owners tend to underestimate the most that you've seen in your experience?
But yeah, a lot of facility owners, especially new ones, think, where's my risk? These people are coming to me because they can't or shouldn't live at home anymore. They already know that there's some shortcomings, if you will. How can I be at risk for this? And of course, there's a lot of different ways that they can be at risk, but I think that's one mistake. People think if they fell at home and then they fall here, how can I be negligent? How can I be responsible for that? And there's a lot of different factors that go into it that can make you be responsible. And there again, too, a lot of people think, I can just have a homeowner's policy. What's wrong with that? And they don't realize that there's so many exclusions in there relating to business. Of course, there's no coverage for liability. Every once in a while, you might have a company that'll pay a property claim, but usually not. I've seen companies flat out deny a claim, even just for property, because we thought we were covering a home with a single family in it. And that's not what we'll cover. That's not it at all. So I have seen claims denied.
Yeah, that's really important to work with someone who understands what those common coverage gaps are. And I want to get to that here in a minute. But in terms of risk, just for folks to understand, there is a lot of risk. And some of the more common ones would be like resident falls, medication errors, elopement, abuse or neglect allegations, employee injuries, property damage, cybersecurity, just to name a few.
Mhm.
Are there any others that you feel like I may be missing, Lori?
A lot of people think they can go without business income, and that's another thing that will not be covered on a homeowner's policy at all. Say you have a covered causal loss to your building and you can't have residents for a few months, that could potentially come in and play a big role in you being able to keep paying bills and not. And so there's some of the companies will carry an additional coverage that I think we need to pay kind of increased attention to, and that's evacuation expense. And a lot of times it's not going to be a full blown policy limit, it would be a smaller limit, but it can really come in handy to reimburse some expenses you have if you need to move your residence. And of course, that's one of the things, like all of these policies, they're all typically what we call non-standard. They're all going to follow their own proprietary policy language, especially on professional and general liability. So it's really important to not just to look at the title of a coverage or an endorsement, but really kind of dig down and find out what's really there. But
it's important, certainly to read the fine print, that's for sure. Lori, would you mind, without sharing any identifying information, but can you walk us through maybe one or two real claims that show how quickly an assisted living incident could become significant?
And so one of the most common, not surprisingly, is falls. And I do sometimes do some other kind of presentations on risk management. And so there are a lot of claim studies in those. And falls, like I say, that is one of the most frequent for assisted living. Medication errors, and sometimes it could be something like improper care. Maybe, we should have done a 2-person transfer, but I was really trying to just get this done by myself, and that didn't turn out well. So those are a few examples. And medication errors are there too, but it's not as frequent in assisted living. But I think some of the things that kind of lead to some of the, kind of going back to how you can be negligent, I will say being short-staffed is one of the things that I have seen that have led to people being found negligent. So for instance, there was one resident fell, and they actually went to the hospital, and they never returned to the facility, but they passed about 6 months later, and they were actually cared for at home between the time they'd been at the facility and released from the hospital. But of course, they turned around, they filed a claim, and as much as it initially didn't look like they were going to pay that one, because they didn't feel like they were negligent, they did end up paying, I think, probably about $100,000 on that one. And that's about the same amount on another one, kind of similar scenario. So we have seen some of those. But and then too, from a real life case study, there was an elopement, and this one was actually from a locked facility, and somehow a resident, they could never really determine how this resident was able to figure out the keypad, but apparently they were. And they went out, and unfortunately they were in the courtyard area, and it was a very hot day, and unfortunately they found the resident hours later deceased, and payment was made on that one. But one of the things on that one that was mentioned was the facility had tried to talk to the family, and they had let them know, hey, we think he's really exit seeking. So they tried to get them to have some sort of pendant or monitoring device, and the family refused. But they didn't get documentation of that offer and refusal. So that's the kind of thing that hopefully no one ever has to go through that. But if you offer some additional services and it's declined, please get documentation.
Yeah, document.
Unfortunately, abuse has been one that's increasing. And it's kind of tough to defend yourself when a caregiver pushes a resident.
Yeah.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah, that's heartbreaking.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. For example, for that elopement that happened, other than documentation of the offer for the pendant or something like that, could it be prevented, or was it covered by the insurance? What was that process like? Do you remember?
And that one was in one of the reports, in an industry report. That one did pay policy limits, which was probably $1 million. And I think on that one too, there was a lot of negative publicity, but I'm not sure how preventable that one would have been, of course, unless they had gotten the family to agree to some sort of monitoring. But on some of the cases where facilities are found negligent, it relates to a maintenance issue. So there was another one where involving an abuse situation, and the resident ended up deceased. And one of the ways the facility was found negligent was that there was known to be problems with the security cameras, just several different maintenance issues on that one, which led to the tragic consequences. But also, and maybe if they had everything in working order and their alarms were not working and such, so maybe that one could have been prevented.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's important to think through all these different
Mm-hmm.
things as an operator and an owner because you never know when these situations are going to come up. And you have to remember the weight of the responsibility of caring for seniors. Lori, I wanted to ask you when you review an assisted living owner's existing insurance, what are the most common mistakes or coverage gaps that you find?
So a lot of them have to do with just the insured not realizing some of the sublimits that they have. So, yeah, you might have coverage for elopement, falls, bed sores, but they might be limited to 100,000, 300,000, or even some of them, you might have that, but it excludes bed sores at the stage 3 or 4. And generally speaking, if you're truly with an insurance company that is meant to write the assisted livings, a lot of times you will have some robust coverages, but then a lot of times too, there's so many carve outs that people just don't realize where everything is. And I think one of the biggest things comes on the property side where people don't realize, oh, okay, I've got a 2% wind hail deductible. That doesn't sound bad. But we always try to make sure to equate that to dollars because you might have a whole lot bigger deductible than you think you do. And those are some of the biggest ones when I see other people's, or just going back to just trying to have a homeowner's policy. No, that doesn't work.
Yeah, that's going to end badly.
Mm-hmm.
What are
Yeah.
some of the essential types of insurance coverage that an assisted living owner operator should consider?
Of course. And like I say, a lot of times that's going to encompass a lot of just the typical coverages, but be aware of the sublimits and exclusions. And also on property, just obviously you want to make sure that you have business income, of course, your contents, and then going back to some of the extra coverages like evacuation expense, that's going to be most of the time that's going to be offered on your professional and general liability because you have the obligation to protect your residents and get them out if you need to. But sometimes it's considered a property coverage. So that's just one that varies. Hired non-owned auto, or obviously if you have some sort of a regular transportation, you need to have a business auto, not a personal auto. Employment practices is one coverage that people frequently go without, and that is to address hiring, firing issues, some of those things, some of the workplace issues that could come up. And of course, you want workers' comp for injury to your employees.
Awesome.
And
Yeah, that's really helpful.
yeah, and if you have if you're a more complex scenario with a lot of investors, you might want to think about some directors and officers coverage.
That's a good point because, yeah, there's definitely a good bit of folks who are investing in the space and bringing on investors and want to make sure covering that risk as well. I've heard more steam behind cyber liability insurance as well. Is that typically included in the professional or general liability, or is that a separate coverage to look for?
So that's one that kind of falls into different spaces. A lot of the professional and general liability will have some additional coverage or options, just kind of like for general data breach, but also for HIPAA. If you have something, a HIPAA violation or something like that, a lot of times that could be included. More and more carriers are offering that, but you can also get that as a standalone coverage. And it's usually pretty economical.
Okay. Yeah, that's good to know. I think a lot of times assisted living owners think about how can I get the lowest premium
Mhm.
possible? What are some tips for comparing insurance quotes and what should they evaluate besides just the premium?
And that is one of the things that we always try to do is get more than one quote. We're not always successful at that, but for one thing, everybody has different risk tolerance. So there are some that want everything that they can possibly pick up on a policy. They want that. And then there's others who, hey, I'm going to take care of that property damage myself, that kind of thing. So you do want to, we usually do a side by side comparison. Compare those sublimits, compare your deductibles, and just do your duty. And it's people a lot of times think on property, especially, I'm going to save tons if I go ahead and have that higher deductible. It's okay. I'll save money now. We recently, just last week, we're working on one. It was a property renewal, and they'd had this 5% wind hail deductible. So that worked out on for them about $67,000 deductible. So I offered them a 3% in the same company, and it went down. So it dropped the wind hail deductible by over $20,000, and it cost them $400 more for the year. So ask some of those questions, especially now, because the market is a little bit softening. 3 years ago, you were probably lucky to get a quote, but now take advantage of it. And if you are with a company that has a $100,000 sublimit on falls, have your agent ask, they'd like to stay with you, but can we bump that limit up? So this is a good time to try to beef up some of those coverages. But really, we do like a side-by-side comparison and try to equate, just give you the tools to make the decisions. Because everybody's
Yeah,
different.
that is really helpful. Yeah, exactly. It's all going to depend on risk tolerance, how much capital reserves you have, all those sorts of things. Can you weather the storm, figuratively and literally
Yeah.
when it comes to some of these issues? I don't know if this is something that you'd be willing to share or not, but are there minimum coverage amounts or sublimit amounts that you would say, hey, you need to strongly consider having at least this amount of coverage? Is that something you'd be willing to share?
Sorry to interrupt this episode, but let's be honest. Most real estate investing right now, it's either buy a fourplex or try Airbnb and hope for the best.
Yeah, we're not here for that.
We're here to show you what we believe is the most overlooked high cash flow real estate strategy in the game right now. You guessed it, residential assisted living. It's literally the one place in real estate where you can net six figures on a single home and feel like a decent human being at the same time. You're helping sweet old ladies eat pancakes and play bingo and live longer through better care. You tell me what's better than that.
So, we're hosting a free live webinar called How You Can Create Financial Freedom with Residential Assisted Living. No fluff, just value. And it's happening at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time, 6:30 Mountain Time. No excuses. It's online. Put on sweatpants. We won't judge.
We'll break down why residential assisted living is the best opportunity right now, the 5 steps to take down your first home, and how to set up a business that makes a real impact and real money.
Spots are limited, so don't be that person who DMs us in 3 months saying, wait, is it too late to start?
So hit up therowroom.com/webinar and register now.
Be the hero your grandma already thinks that you are.
We'll see you there. Pancakes not included.
For a general commercial policy like GL, the typical limits default are like $1 million occurrence, $2 million aggregate. And in the professional general liability world, like the medical kind of thing, for one reason or another, the typical default limits are $1 million occurrence, $3 million aggregate. So that's what most policies are written on. And I would say not less than, of course, it's better if a company offers full policy limits on something like falls, which a lot of them do. but some of them are going to sublimit coverage. And especially if you've had an issue, like if you have a claim or if you have a lot of residents that have bed sores or something, companies are going to try to limit their responsibility there. But I wouldn't go with less than 100,000, 300,000 aggregate on the sublimits, because I have seen companies offer 25, 50, and that's not defense. So, and it's surprising. Okay, we can bump it up, but it's going to be $150 more. I'm like, okay, let's do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's important in this world to understand the risk of not paying for more coverage and make sure you fully grasp that, because it can be devastating if you don't have a high enough coverage and you're having to pay out of pocket the difference of what insurance will cover versus what the claim looks like. And that can be devastating for your business.
And I will say one thing, if you start out at 1,300,000 and 1 year you decide, oh, I really have to go down to 500,000. And so just remember, you want to make sure you're protecting your assets. And so in some cases, 500,000 might be okay. But then next year, if you decide you want to go back up to 1 million, companies may not be willing to consider that. So that's one thing to keep in mind. And I would like to go back to one thing, talking from the very beginning about one of the things people don't think that they need the coverage. So one thing I do hear a lot of times is, I don't need professional. I'm not a doctor. So it is a misnomer, and it really should be better thought of as like an Arizona emissions coverage, because it's not just for someone who's a doctor or such, but it should be more thought of as medical malpractice. And the medical is a very broad category, anything healthcare related. But again, so I just wanted to make that point, that even though we say professional all day long, it's for everyone that's in the healthcare space.
Yeah, sounds like definitely something you want to consider and should get from a coverage perspective. Lori, we kind of hinted in the introduction about more owners now using AI tools to summarize policies, to compare quotes, and that can make complicated documents feel easier to understand, but it may also lead to a false sense of confidence.
Yes.
Where do you feel like AI can be helpful when reviewing or comparing insurance quotes and policies, and where have you seen it can be dangerous?
I think it could be helpful in suggesting coverages. I recently received an extensive list from a new applicant, and it occurred to me that, oh, you asked AI what you needed. And it was really a good list. And so some of the coverages were very specific. Basically, the default is you have to just say, I can't promise you that every quote's going to have all this, but yeah, some of those higher level coverages are the things that we will be quoting. And part of that's just, I think they were just wanting to make sure that I knew the space, which is fine. I don't blame them. But recently I received twice these are even from brokers who had just done a quick AI analysis of quotes. And it was just because they didn't really look back over them the way they should have before they sent them. And we were speaking about sublimits versus full policy limits. Two of the policies had full policy limits for things like falls or elopements, bed sores. So no distinction. So that sublimit's a reduction in coverage. The third quote had 100,000, 300,000 sublimit on falls, elopement, etc. So AI thought that was the better quote because it mentioned those coverages, whereas the other company didn't mention them at all. And that's not right, because it's actually a reduction in coverage. And just the thing that it will be hard for AI to recognize is the basic policy language starts out on an insurance policy. It's very broad. We'll cover you for negligence, for bodily injury, property damage, unless it's excluded. So that's why the policies are rife with exclusions. And then recently had several people, a couple of insureds asking, where in my insurance policy does it say I'm covered for fire? It's not going to say that, because the coverage form they're on is, again, one that says will cover you for damage to your building unless it's excluded. So again, that's why there's tons of exclusion. So nowhere in there is going to say we will cover you for fire. Now, if you have one of the lesser coverages, one of the lesser coverage forms that's named perils, and it will list like 7 things that you're covered for, and fire is going to be one of them. So AI might recognize that as the better coverage, whereas the other form is actually broader. So those are some of the downfalls that I've seen already.
Yeah, it's good to understand that, especially because those documents are very complex and it can make it a little bit more difficult to understand what those exclusions are. So definitely want to make sure that you're also underwriting your AI. And sometimes I feel like AI can produce confident but definitely inaccurate conclusions. And so that is important as well. And just the understanding of what actually goes into an assisted living operation, especially on the residential side, can be a little bit more difficult for AI to understand. So there's definitely multiple things to look at. So that's really helpful.
And the headings, the titles of some of the policy endorsements are very misleading unless you read them and tie them back to the section of the policy that they're amending. It can be very difficult to decipher what it means.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of times it's information overload, it's paper overload. No one wants to sit there and really read it. So AI can be helpful, but just know what the potential risks are from that perspective. Speaking of risk, I want to talk a little bit about kind of risk management practices. So insurance, my understanding is insurance is more of like the safety net, but you really have to have strong operations. You have to provide exceptional care. What risk management practices should every assisted living home have in place? And I know before this, we were talking also a bit about disaster management as well. So what are your thoughts there?
Some of the tools, obviously, I think good policies and procedures. An assisted living facility is ahead of the game rather than some industries because it is regulated. So if you are following what you have to do for the state and enforcing all those policies and procedures for your operations, you already have a good risk management program. And I would say making sure everyone stays up on their continuing education, keeping your staff engaged, and making sure that they feel like they have ownership in their position, what they're doing. I know working with a former inspector, they always said a lot of times they could just tell right away how an inspection was going to go when they came into a facility. If the staff was engaged and comfortable, then that really bode well for the operations. Now, as far as the property side of things, I will say in risk management in general, a prompt response that's the recurring thing that helps minimize damage operationally and for the property side. Have a good relationship with some of your contractors, plumbing, electrician, HVAC. So they know because when there is a cat loss, everyone's going to be busy. I think it was after Ike. No, not Ike, I'm so sorry. The winter storm Uri, that one of my assisted livings had sprinkler issues and it cratered and it was great. But so I remember she mentioned she knew just call right away. She didn't wait. She didn't hesitate. She called the mitigation company. And they said that if she had waited even a day, because they were able to get to her right away, if she'd even waited till the next day, it probably would have been weeks before they could have gotten around to her. And so just some of the minimum tools, make sure everyone knows where to shut the water off, because especially for a water claim, it can turn bad very quickly. If you have an incident that's more of a liability incident, make sure you do those written interviews with everybody right away. They're going to be much more spontaneous. Everyone's still around. If someone says, I didn't see anything, go ahead and write that down. That way people can't really discuss things and, is that really what I saw? Because if you do have to defend yourself and you say, yes, there was this incident, so we got this from everybody. Here's what happened. It's going to be so much better than if 6 months or a year later, you're trying to find people, talk to them. So just that prompt response is probably one of the most important things you can do.
That's great. Is there anything else you can think of that an operator should do immediately when an incident occurs? Obviously, documentation is really important. What else have you noticed is really important to do immediately or as soon as possible?
Kind of depending on circumstances. Obviously, for the property side of things, you've got to do everything you can to minimize that damage. And if you do have something come up where you think you might need to move residents, that's one of those things. If you do have the reimbursement expense, you don't necessarily have to wait. And that's one of those places where all those coverage forms can vary, but it could come in handy there again too, that prompt response. It could be man-made or a natural disaster, but just have the tools around you and make sure that if you're not there, that someone that is there has the ability to make those decisions.
That sounds great. Lori, if listeners only remember one lesson from this conversation today, what do you want it to be?
Don't be afraid to ask questions. Do your homework. Work with an agent that's knowledgeable in the space. It can just mean the difference in getting the right coverage or not getting coverage at all. Just kind of make sure that you get the tools that you need to make the decisions that you need. Don't be afraid to ask for options, ask questions. And if you want to shop, and you shouldn't shop every year, that's not helpful to your business at all. But just because if we shop it every year, then after a while, no one wants to give us a quote on things. But you should occasionally shop. And that's just part of doing the same kind of homework you do on your agent as a vendor as you do all your vendors.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Just don't be afraid of questions.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very clear that you want to be a resource, that you're willing to review current programs. For folks who aren't watching this, there's a fly that just keeps flying around my head. So check it out on YouTube and see if you can spot the fly. It's been driving me crazy. But you've shared that you want to be a resource, not simply sell insurance, and that you're willing to review current programs for owners who are unsure about their coverage. So how can folks reach out to you if they want to learn more or they want to potentially work with you, Lori?
I'm always available by email. It's lufg.com. Our main office number is 979-206-2524, or my cell 979-966-2524. So we try to respond as fast as we can. But
sounds great.
Yeah, I do want to be thought of as a resource. So I've been in this for a long time and have tried to take extra classes so I can learn. That's the great thing about insurance is you keep learning.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Same with assisted living space.
Yeah.
Same with medicine. Yeah, absolutely.
Something new every day.
Yeah, but it makes it fun. And do you have a website as well that folks can look at?
Yes, .com.
Awesome. What a great domain. Lori, thank you so much for joining us, for helping our listeners better understand assisted living risk, insurance coverage, and how to responsibly use AI when evaluating their options. To everyone listening, I would encourage you to reach out to Lori so you fully understand how you can work insurance into the equation and realize that it's not simply a real estate investment. You are responsible for the safety and the care of vulnerable residents, your employees, and the business that you are building. So I want to make sure that you are protecting yourself as well. So thank you so much, Lori, for being here. Thanks for everyone listening to another episode of the Row Room Assisted Living Podcast, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to the Row Room Assisted Living Podcast. We hope you found today's episode insightful. If you enjoyed it, make sure to leave us a raving 5-star review. And a quick review helps more listeners find the show and more seniors get the exceptional care they deserve.
And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And just so you know, we have prepared some free resources for you to help you succeed in residential assisted living in addition to this podcast. Head over to theralroom.com, that is theralroom.com, to download our free 10-step guide to launch your first or next residential assisted living home, or our 10 reasons to passively invest in residential assisted living ebooks.
And if you're ready to take the next step and make real moves in the RAL industry, join us in the RAL Room Mastermind. It is an exclusive community where we deep dive into everything you need to launch and grow your own residential assisted living business. You'll get access to recorded courses, live calls with industry experts, a RAL calculator, resources and tools, like-minded entrepreneurs, funding opportunities, and an expert networking community to help you along your journey.
Be sure to join us next time on the RAL Room podcast as we continue to explore the world of residential assisted living with more great guests. See you then.